Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to deconstruct one of the most famous miracles in history to get to the real story. A story of incredible methods, deep collaboration, and just absolute perseverance.
You know the image, right? That little girl at the water pump, light bulb going off, finally understanding the word water? It's an image that's basically burned into our collective memory. It's become this universal symbol for overcoming impossible odds.
Okay, but is that the real story? Let's get into this. Because beyond that one famous moment, there's a much more complex and, frankly, a much more incredible story. It's a story about human effort, about specific teaching methods, and a profound collaboration that made the so-called miracle happen. To really, truly grasp what Helen Keller accomplished, we have to start by understanding the sheer depth of her isolation. It was so much more than just silence and darkness. Think about this. She later called her early life a no world. Just try to imagine an existence without the single most important tool we use to build our reality, language. It wasn't an empty world, it was a completely chaotic one. I mean, her own words just paint this chilling picture. It wasn't some peaceful void. It was, as she said, a state of anarchy, a storm of sensations without any names or any meaning. And that right there, that's the true starting point of her incredible journey. So that breakthrough at the water pump, it wasn't magic. It wasn't a lightning strike. It was actually the result of a very deliberate, systematic, and honestly, a relentless process led by her teacher, Anne Sullivan. This quote right here reveals Sullivan's core strategy: total immersion. She didn't just teach Helen single words. No, she was constantly spelling full, complex sentences into Helen's hand, trusting that, just like any child learns to speak, Helen would eventually soak up the patterns and the meanings from the context of it all.
And what about learning to speak? I mean, how do you even begin to do that? Well, they used this amazing technique called the Tonoma method. Helen would literally place her hand on Anne's face like this, feeling the vibrations of speech. The thumb would be on the larynx, the first finger on the lips, and the second finger on the nose.
And here's the thing, it worked. The very first word she ever managed to say was "it." But get this, after just 7 lessons, she could form that powerful sentence, "I am not dumb now." This is so crucial because it shows that this astounding progress came from a specific, repeatable method. But this method didn't just exist in a vacuum. Helen's journey was never a solo performance. It was a deep and absolutely essential intellectual partnership. In fact, if you go back to the very first edition of her autobiography, it's made crystal clear. The editor, John Macy, he writes that the only way to really understand Helen's story is to recognize her life as a collaborative life. So who was on this team? Well, first, Anne Sullivan, who is a far cry from the saintly figure you might imagine. She was the daughter of poor immigrants, an orphan herself, and described as a brilliant fighter, not some gentle spirit. Then there was John Macy, a Harvard-educated literary critic who helped Helen take her raw thoughts and actually shape them into published works. So, what was the ultimate test of this unique, collaborative education? Well, it came when Helen decided to apply to Radcliffe, one of the most prestigious colleges in America.
And as you can see, she didn't just pass, she excelled. In 1899, she sat for the exact same grueling exams as every other student, in things like advanced Greek and advanced Latin, which, by the way, she passed with credit.
But here's the part that is just astonishing. A newspaper report from the time shows she did this with an almost unbelievable set of extra handicaps. She had to use a braille system she wasn't familiar with, she had no way to keep track of time, and the officials in the room couldn't even communicate with her.
This quote from the Boston Transcript really says it all. It captures the profound isolation and just the sheer force of will it must have taken for her to succeed under those conditions.
And even after this monumental achievement, her intellectual journey was far from over. She constantly had to fight for her own authenticity against critics who dismissed her as a fraud or, in the cruel words of one, a dupe of her dreams. So, after peeling back all these layers of the myth, what's the real story that we should be telling? The real story isn't about some magical moment. It's about a systematic method, a vital collaboration, and an unwavering perseverance against unimaginable odds. And understanding the how doesn't diminish the story at all. It makes it real and arguably far more inspiring.
This just reminds us that her incredible achievement was built on a foundation of trust with her two essential partners, Anne Sullivan and John Macy.
And all this leaves us with a final thought. Helen Keller's story is maybe the ultimate testament to the power of language. For her, it wasn't just a tool for communication, it was the very architecture of her reality. And it forces us to ask, if language could build an entire world from a silent, dark chaos, what exactly is it building for us every single day?